The West Highland Way, 96 miles of rugged hills running from Mungai, just north of Glasgow, up to Fort William, up in the Scottish Highlands. My name's Kieran, and over the next 5.5 days, me and my friend Steve will be completing this hike, carrying everything we need in our backpacks. The water along the route was incredible. The further you walked north, and the higher you got, the cleaner and more pure the water felt. It was way better than anything you'd ever drink at home. On the first day the weather was amazing. It was the middle of March, yet it felt like summer. The sun was beating down and the winds were minimal. For a large part of the day, I was wearing nothing but my thin trousers and a t-shirt. It's all I needed. My fleece, puffy jacket and waterproof stayed in the top of my pack. This is what backpacking is all about. The views approaching camp were stunning. We were quite high up on the first day, so we had a lovely view out over Loch Lomond, the largest natural body of water in the UK. It truly was a sight to behold. We found a nice isolated spot up in the hills. It was flat, large enough for 2 tents, and with excess room for us to lounge about. It was ideal for the 2 of us to camp. We had a lovely view of the sun setting over the loch. It was generally a perfect camp spot. We set up our tents and began to settle down for the night. After a long day of walking, some good food was really needed. Chicken noodles with crispy onions is my go-to for camping. They're lightweight, high calorie, and a general comfort meal at home anyways. As darkness drew closer, we got into our tents and settled down for the night. I slept brilliantly. We woke up the next morning to the patter of rain on our tents. This would be an unfortunate indicator to the next couple days of the trip. After some coffee and breakfast, we headed back out onto the trail.
Aye.
Upon reaching Loch Lomond, the weather hadn't let up. It was raining consistently and heavily, and all our clothes had almost soaked through. It was like this constantly for about 2 days. The loch was drowned out by fog. On a nice day you'd be able to see the loch in all of its beauty, from edge to edge. Unfortunately, we didn't get the privilege of seeing it. The rain had flooded out a lot of the track. This created quite a few obstacles for us.
Oh, yeah, bastard. I thought that'd be a bit more stable, that. Aye.
You settled it down, haven't you?
Although the rain continued and showed no signs of letting up, our spirits remained high. but we didn't know for how much longer.
Yeah.
Put the back in the Durham, you know.
Aye.
You think?
Oh. This is hellish, just like.
I can't believe how wet it is, honestly.
Aye.
Seriously, I can't. Yeah.
We knew that the next village had a pub. They welcomed walkers and often had a fire on. The fire sounded like an absolute godsend and drew me straight in. We ordered coffee and some food, but to our disappointment, there was no fire today. Most of the places along the trail were just opening up for the start of the hiking season, and were short on staff and stock.
It's alright, thanks very much. Thank you.
Without a doubt, these were some of the best chips I've ever had. They were super crispy and soft on the inside. I also had the opportunity to charge up my devices, including my phone and portable charger. The hike would bring with it some incredible views. Waterfalls like this became a common occurrence. It wasn't long before we decided to stop for food again. Hiking almost 20 miles a day burns a lot of calories, and they need to be replenished.
Picking up again. No video.
I sat down with a protein bar, but the rain was still coming down heavily, and we couldn't stop for long.
Jinx is saying it's calming down there. It's been chopping hell out here. Alright.
Oh. Not good. Aye. Oh, fucking hell, aye.
We arrived at our home for the night, the Rural Choice Bothy.
Aye.
If you don't know what a bothy is, it's essentially a small building on private land which is run and maintained by a bothy association. They often have bed platforms, some have fires, some will have stoves. They're a solid shelter and a great option when the weather's bad and you don't want to be going to sleep in the rain and waking up in it. It's common practice in bothies for people to leave wood in the shelter to dry out. The previous tenants hadn't done this, so we had to go and collect some wood. It was all obviously wet, so it took a while to get the fire going. I spent about 2 hours getting the fire up to heat. I used the smaller flames to dry out the bigger sticks, and eventually the bigger logs. After about an hour of sitting in the back of the fire, some of the larger logs started to catch, and we had a real fire burning. There ended up being 6 of us in the bothy that night. 3 Germans showed up, and despite a slight language barrier, we sat around the fire throughout the night and had a good laugh. When you're out in the wild, everyone shares one common interest, and that's enough to get everyone by. Everybody was soaked through due to the past 2 days' weather. Everybody was grateful for the fire that I'd had going. We got all of our stuff dried out, and that made starting the next morning a lot more comfortable. Contrary to yesterday, there was no sitting watching the sunset over the loch. We were in a cabin in the woods, with the rain hammering down. I had my noodles, chilled out by the fire for a while longer, and then got into my sleeping bag. Nothing was quite as dry as I hoped it'd be, but it was better than starting soaking wet. I made myself my morning coffee, using my coffee bags, which I'd highly recommend. It's a great way to get nice high quality coffee on the trail. My breakfast consisted of granola and protein powder. This was a great way to get something like cereal without having to carry the weight of milk. We stopped nice and early to grab some water. Staying hydrated on the trail is essential. Throughout the trip I also used hydration tablets. These help you replenish electrolytes that you lose during hiking. Especially along the loch, waterfalls like these weren't hard to come by. It seemed like every couple hundred metres we were crossing a small footbridge across a huge waterfall. As long as you've got your water filter, you'll never be short of water in Scotland. We had a quick stop at the Inversnaid Hotel to grab some coffee. It was a nice quick break to get out of the rain. On my third day, things began to get tough. A previous problem with my knee arose again. Every step I took was agony. I could barely walk, especially on the downhills. The weather wasn't helping my mood either. The rain had been so heavy that everything was soaked through. The rivers were flowing way faster than they should have this time of year. They were often breaking the banks. I didn't feel much for the rest of the day. I was motivated by my girlfriend to push through. She helped me get over the mental barrier of the problem with my knee. I owe my completion to her, really. We ended up settling down in a little pine forest. I can't remember the exact location. It was near an old war crossroads. My tent was filled with pine needles. The area was extremely confined, so my tent was barely set up properly. It was only properly guyed out by tying a guy line round a tree. On our fourth day we came into a little village called Tindrum. There was a diner and a few shops, and I stopped to get myself a hot dog. After this long of eating trail food, I was craving a proper meal. I got myself a bottle of Iron Brew. I don't know what it is about it, but it just tastes so much better in a glass bottle. I'm sure if I ate it now I'd disagree, but at the time this hot dog tasted like the best thing I'd ever eaten. The further we progressed north on the journey, the more spectacular the views got.
Alright, it's opening up a bit. Since that millionaire lifestyle, is it? No, just dirty washing, just wash it new. So the stinky one stayed in the bottom of my bag all day. Yeah. I couldn't get it clean.
Yeah.
The rolling landscape and rugged mountains were a joy to behold. It was like constantly living in a painting. Today, the sun finally decided to come out. It was quite humid, but it wasn't wet, which meant I wasn't constantly walking with my jacket on. My gear was drying out on the back of my bag, and again, I was hiking with just a t-shirt. It really did make a pleasant change to the mood. I don't think we would have carried on if the weather had been as bad as it had been for the past 2 days. Tonight's camp spot was beautiful. It was a large area of flat grass, surrounded by a river. We had a constant source of water, surrounded by the hills. There was even a rainbow, which was quite nice. As it was such a nice spot, there were a couple other tents on the pitch. I spoke to one of the guys, who was really friendly. We had a quick conversation about our journeys and how far each of us had come.
You do it for, innit? Yeah. Look behind you, man. Look at the clouds hanging over the hills behind you.
So, after 2 days of constant, horrific rain, finally got some sun, just as we're setting up camp. Full day's been on and off, mainly dry, but nothing special. Hopefully everything will dry off a bit now. I'll have a look at my foot in a little bit, because I haven't got a clue about it's going to be. It's hurting, but it's all taped up, so it's not being able to breathe all day. It's soaking wet. We'll see, I guess.
Me and Steve decided to spend the night in the nearby pub. I knew from past experience that drinking lager when you're meant to be sleeping in a tent isn't a great idea, especially when you're surrounded by other people. I stuck to the shorts and was sipping on Kahlua all night. The next morning we got a nice early start, accompanied with some incredible views. We needed to get some water, so we decided to stop. There was a stunning river running through the path, which had a bridge going over it. I climbed down the bank and filled up my water bottle. We can just pretend I didn't almost fall over. After a couple miles and a short descent, we came down in towards King's House. We stopped at the ski centre to try and get some food and drink, but the staff wouldn't let us in with our bags. We decided to take the small risk and just leave them outside. We got in, sat down and tried to order food, but there was no hot meals available and we just got a cake. We decided we were going to stop at the King's House Hotel and get something there. We had some soup at the hotel, which was lovely. The hotel had recently been renovated. The inside was beautiful and the staff were extremely accommodating. They were very welcoming towards us walkers. After we ate, we carried on down the route. We had a beautiful view of Etivmore, one of the better known Monroes. We began to climb the Devil's Ladder. It was definitely a steep incline, but not as bad as people made it out to be. The views around here were absolutely awesome. Sometimes I just had to stop and admire where I was. Thankfully, I didn't have much problems with my knee on the incline, which made it a lot easier to get up than I was expecting. Admittedly, I was a little bit knackered when I reached the top. I just kind of had to sit down for a little bit. The harsh wind at the summit felt amazing. It did a really good job at cooling me down. The top of the Devil's Staircase is 550 metres, or 1800 feet. I began to have some trouble with my knees on the way down. The problem with the way down from the Devil's Staircase is that you're going from all that way up, down to sea level, over the course of about 3 hours. It probably took me longer than it really needed to, but I could barely walk because of my knee. We passed a couple more hikers, including somebody doing an ultramarathon. We still had about 20 miles to go for the rest of the trip, and there was a guy who we spoke to at the top who claimed he was trying to get to Fort William by the end of the night.
Couldn't really find much to eat in the co-op, so I've got Warburton's potato cakes, and I'm basically just stuffing it with crisps. I've never had potato cakes, they're really nice. It's just a nice surprise, considering they're called fucking potato cakes.
Unfortunately, on my last day I didn't get much recorded. My phone died overnight, so the last day coming down into Glen Nevis and down towards the final point at Fort William, I was entirely without a phone. So I'm just going to leave with the final message of this is genuinely one of the best experiences of my life. I'd recommend anyone to go and do it, no matter what your ability. If you can afford the gear, if you can afford even to go along it, staying in B&Bs, hostels, anything, do it. It's absolutely incredible. I'm going to leave you now with the photos I've taken along the way. The last one is my photo at the final point. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed spending the time on the trail and creating this video. Thank you. Bye bye.